Hi guys, welcome back. This is Steven here, and today I want to give you 9 reasons why you need a super wide angle lens when you are recording video. Now the first reason is because you can actually have a lot more creativity in edit afterwards, in post. And if you have a shot and you are too much zoomed into the shot, you won't be able to crop the shot bigger, so you're pretty much stuck with the shot you have. But if you have a super wide angle, you can actually capture the scene a little bit wider than you need, and then afterwards crop in or zoom in to what you want, especially if you are publishing in HD but you're recording in 4K. Then you can technically crop in without losing any form of detail or quality of the video. Now the second reason why you would need a super wide angle in video is that you gain a lot of stabilization. The stabilization systems in the camera, that's now obviously if you have in-body stabilization. I'm not talking about lens stabilization. Most of the super wide lenses out there don't actually have built-in stabilization. So, but if you have a camera that's got built-in stabilization, it makes it a lot easier for the built-in stabilization system to actually stabilize your image. The reason is that it's the opposite of a telephoto lens. If you have a telephoto lens that zooms in extremely far, any little bit of a shake that you would get on the camera would have a significant effect on the shake on the image. The more you zoom in, the more every tiny little shake is amplified. With a super wide lens, it works exactly the opposite. Any little bit of a shake you have on the camera actually gets minimized when it comes to the image and how it looks. So it makes it a lot easier for your camera's built-in stabilization system. I think the only cameras that have built-in stabilization at the moment is probably your Sony, Panasonic and Olympus cameras. I think the new Canon M50, correct me if I'm wrong, the M50 does have it. Not sure how good it is, but you have that extra ability for the stabilization system to actually keep up with the shake. So you can get a super stable image, especially if you, like with the GH5 or I'm shooting on, you can actually enable video IS lock. If you enable that and you don't pan the camera, so your shots are purely zoom in and zoom out, you get insanely stable images. So stable that it actually looks like you've taken it with a gimbal. So that means at the end of the day you actually don't need to buy a gimbal. There's a lot of cost saving there because you don't need a gimbal. And it's also something that's big and bulky that you have to charge and balance and set up just to get your shot. Now you can have a gimbal-like experience purely with your camera body. No extra batteries, no extra balancing, no extra setup time. You grab your camera and you go. That to me is very, very, very valuable when it comes to video. Especially if you are in a scene that you don't control much. If it's sort of more of a run and gun situation, like when you're in a scene with lots of people and or you're shooting animals or vlogging or whatever, a lot of the times you don't actually have time to do any form of setup. You need to grab your camera and you need to go. So yeah, there's a lot of cost savings and extra just hassles that you basically skip by having a wide angle. The other nice thing is because you have this gimbal-like experience, that's now point number 3, is that for B-roll you don't actually have to increase your frame rate. You don't have to take the footage in slow-mo. Obviously if you have some action taking place like someone running, yes, then you're going to need slow-mo. But if you are just paying attention to a little plant and panning around it, or having a sort of a pan up shot across a lake or anything like that where there's no movement in the actual scene but just the camera moving around in the scene, you don't have to switch modes. You don't have to switch to slow-mo. You can leave the camera as is. The normal mode, 25 or 24 frames per second, you can just leave it in that and go with it. So there's also that convenience of not constantly switching modes. Today you'll see that all the B-roll I shot today, I have not used slow-mo once. There was one with the birds, I used slow-mo there, but that's purely because I wanted the bird in the picture to obviously have slow-mo. But any other shot where I'm walking through the forest, or I'm panning across the landscape, or anything like that, I've never once used slow-mo. And you'll see, you'll get the gimbal-like experience. It actually looks like it's slow-mo. But that's because it was with a wide-angle lens and with proper in-body stabilization. And then point number 4 is sort of linked to point number 3, and that is because you don't need slow-mo, or you don't need to use slow-mo as much, you actually, if obviously you use slow-mo, your shutter speed also goes up. And if there's not a lot of light around, you're going to have to increase your ISO if you're using slow-mo, which means your picture quality is going to go down. So if the sun is setting like it is now, and I'm starting to shoot slow-mo now, I might have a problem where I'm going to get a lot of graininess because there's just not enough light, because the shutter speed is too high. But if you have the wide angle lens, you've got more stabilization, you don't have to go slow-mo, you get much better images because you can shoot at lower ISOs. So you actually get a gain in image quality. Point number 5 is that you can get very, very different compositions, very unique, very creative compositions. You can get very close to your subjects. You can, there's a lot of places, especially if you go low, if you go down and you shoot up, where if you don't have a wide angle lens or a super wide angle lens, the shot will just not work because you just can't get enough in the shot. Because the ground is there, you can't go lower than the ground. A lot of places as well where you are in a room or in a house and you have to go a little bit further to just get the shot. If you have a super wide angle, you can still get the shot. If you don't, you can have some problems. So yeah, it just gives you that extra little bit of creativity that you can do. There's so much more variety you actually get in your composition if you have a wide angle lens. There's so many more options to explore. And that brings me to point number 6, and that is the scenarios in which you shoot in. Especially when it comes to action, when you are filming somebody driving on a bicycle, or you are filming somebody doing a skateboard trick, or you are filming somebody jogging and you like jogging beside them. There's not always space to get everything in, and especially if things are moving quickly, you don't lose the shot. If something quickly, let's say you get a skateboarder coming towards you and he suddenly does a flip to the left, you don't quickly have to like, he doesn't go out of the shot and you have to catch him again. He sort of stays in shot. So if you are a little bit slow with the camera, it actually makes up for it. So it gives you a little bit more what's the word, it's a little bit more forgiving. You can make some mistakes, but it's fine. It almost looks like it was part of the shot. The guy always stays in frame, doesn't matter what happens. So that's also a nice thing about a super wide angle lens. And point number 7 is for vlogging. If you want to take up vlogging, you're going to have a wide angle lens, purely because you need to be close to the camera. You're going to have your Gorilla Pod, and yeah, you can even obviously extend it out a bit so that it's a little bit further away, but the distance is still about 1 meter. And what can you explain in the distance? You don't just want your head the full frame and that's it. You want to be able to show where you are. You want to be able to see around you. Also, if you're vlogging, you want to use hand gestures. So you're holding the camera with one hand and the other hand you have available. So you can do hand gestures. But now, if you have a super wide angle lens, your hand's not going to leave the frame. Imagine if I use this hand to explain and I talk like this. It just looks very odd because my hand is outside the frame. It just looks so much better if my hands are in the frame and I can explain things like that, and I can show things, I can point, and I can think, and I can use these gestures, and it always is in frame. It's just so much easier. Jeez, but there's a lot of planes here. It's like literally every 20 seconds there's a plane. And I can't even see them. Point number 8 is also a very important one, and that is audio. A lot of people obviously use the lav mics, where it's a little mic that you tie here so that it's close to your mouth so you can actually record. The problem with that is if you are doing a vlogging video, or maybe even an interviewing video or whatever, you don't, and it's sort of more of a run and gun situation. It's not really a controlled environment. What you have then is you're gonna have to switch from one person to the next. You can't always like unplug the lav mic and give it to the next person. And a wide angle lens, if you have a Rode mic on top of your camera like I do right now, you can get a lot closer to your subject. So especially for vlogging, you don't have to hold the camera there. You can actually hold it a bit closer. So if it's windy or also there's a little bit more noise, you can actually hold the camera closer. Then the mic that's mounted on the camera is a lot closer to your mouth, so your audio is just a lot better. And I've got the, for this now for the Micro Four Thirds system, I've got the Olympus or manual focus is on, so obviously it's not going to work the whole. But it's a 7 to 14 millimeter. So on full frame, that's a 14 to 28 millimeter. So it's very wide. And a lot of times I've done some B-roll shots where I sort of come out of the ground or something like that, and I show someone's face, or I like float around the corner to someone's face. And I sometimes get so close that I actually tapped him on the forehead with the mic. So it just shows you how wide it really is. But in the frame, almost the whole face is still in the frame. So you can get really close with the microphone. So your audio is just going to be, it's going to be sharp audio. Then point number 9, this is the final point, which is not the least important point. This is actually a very interesting point. And that is that a lot of, especially with video, this is not photo, this is just video. With video, you get the ability to, a lot of cameras have a, like the GH5, you can record using the whole sensor. The thing is, the whole sensor is about 20 megapixels. Or you can tell it to record using only the center piece, that's 2 megapixels. But full HD video, like I'm recording now, is 2 megapixels. So you actually don't get loss in quality. So the camera basically takes a 20 megapixel video and compresses it to a 2 megapixel video. Or you can tell the camera, no, don't do that. Don't shrink it, just use the middle 2 megapixels and only use that for the video. So the effect you then get is a zoom. And with a super wide angle lens, you can actually get two zoom ranges. So for instance, the one I have here, the 7 to 14 millimeter, I actually get, with normal mode, I get 7 to 14 millimeter. Then I switch to the crop mode, which uses the middle of the sensor. In the GH5, I think most of the Lumix cameras, they call it a teleconverter. It's actually in the menus, you can just enable it. If you enable it, it basically just uses 1 pixel in the sensor is 1 pixel in the video. It doesn't downsample it. So if you enable teleconverter mode, it's almost like I'm mounting another lens. Now suddenly, I think, yeah, now I need to think. I think it takes it to 18 to 30 if I enable the teleconverter mode. Yeah, it's somewhere between there. So basically now I technically have one lens that I've mounted on my camera, but with a quick flick of a menu option, I get another lens. So that's pretty awesome. So the range of the camera is just, or of the lens, just suddenly extended. So you save a lot of money by buying a wide angle lens and just using your teleconverter to switch lenses. You don't need another lens. It's quicker to switch, and you don't actually need to spend money to buy another lens. You can just use one lens, which is awesome. That's also another trick. I don't know if it should actually have been point 10, but if you, like I said, I can't remember what point it was, point 1 or 2 or 3, where I talked about stabilization, where stabilization is a lot easier for your sensor to handle if you are using a wide angle lens. Now the interesting thing is, if you take a wide angle lens, you zoom it all the way out, but you enable the teleconverter. So suddenly you have, instead of, let's say, a 17mm lens, you've got an 18mm lens, which is quite a bit zoomed in. But now your stabilization is absolutely amazing, because the whole stabilizing system still acts as if it's a wide angle lens. So now you get zoomed in shots, but it's almost like you're using a gimbal. It's an amazing mechanism that you can actually employ anywhere. If you have a wide angle, and you can switch to crop mode with in-body stabilization. Now suddenly you can do walk-in shots, walk-out shots, but it's zoomed in, but it's dead stable. Your stabilizer can actually keep up. Whereas if you actually, if you would have mounted an actual 18mm lens and used the full sensor, the in-body stabilization would struggle to keep up because of the actual movement of the image, obviously because you're using a telephoto lens. So it's a very weird hack, if you want to call it that. So it's a bit of a hack to get stabilization while you are actually more zoomed in. So basically what it involves is just to sort of a quick recap on the hack is to use a wide angle lens but using a electronic teleconverter to zoom in, and then using that, obviously this will only work in cameras that have in-body stabilization, and then using that to to get that extra stabilization, which is really awesome. I mean, since I've discovered that, I've been using it everywhere. So on our previous outing I got bitten by a spider. Don't know which spider it is, and as a result I've got a bit of a limp today, so apologies for the shaky footage. At least it gives the stabilization a proper test. But yeah, the wound hasn't almost healed. Let me show you. It's getting there, struggling a little bit, but I think it'll, it's definitely better than it was a couple of days ago. So I think I get to keep my leg, which is nice. I like that. So this is the stabilization you can get with 18mm if you use the teleconverter. You almost get like gimbal-like stabilization. So yeah, that's your tips and tricks for today. If you like this video, then give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more, then remember to subscribe. Until next time, ciao.